therapists of Reddit. What was your biggest "I know I'm not supposed to judge you, but holy beep" moment? Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients, and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week, she canceled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an orgy, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone. I'm not a therapist, but my therapist slipped up and said something she didn't mean to say. She once told me that she loved birds, and her family gets mad that she keeps the dead ones in her refrigerator. Again, she is my therapist. I once worked with 20-something who said, "You're going to be proud of me." One session, she said, "I paid a guy to put sugar in my ex-boyfriend's motorcycle gas tank." I said, "What would make you think that destruction of property would make me proud?" She said, "Because I was going to pay him to cut his brake lines. But I heard you in my head and knew you'd be disappointed." Yeesh. Medical professionals of Reddit. What's the funniest thing a patient has said under anesthesia? This woman undergoing C-section under spinal anesthesia ketamine said, "Show my baby first to my brother-in-law. He deserves to see her first. I sometimes wonder what happened to her marriage after that." Had a patient come into recovery after surgery. She farted so long and loud the entire 20-bed unit heard her. Then she said, "I was trying to clear my throat, excuse me, and I want a vanilla latte, I got a headache." As medical professionals, we had to hold in the laughter, but that didn't stop patients from turning into hyenas. My son was going for a minor procedure, nothing serious. Being a typical dad, I told him that they had to shave all the hair off his body for it. When he came round, he kept asking the recovery nurse if he still had eyebrows. My dad told his proctologist this while getting a hemorrhoid removed. "Hey doc, if you take a scalpel and carve a W in each cheek, it'll spell wow." Medical workers of Reddit. What were the most haunting last words you've heard from a patient? "Thank you" from a little old man with stage 4 lung cancer. He had no family, so I stayed after my shift ended. He just didn't want to die alone, and I refused to let it happen. Don't know why, but it still makes me cry when I think of it. Edit. Thank you for the gold and kind words, fellow Redditors. I very much appreciate it. Can I smoke in here? We were on an ambulance. Obligatory. Not a medical worker. But famous author Roald Dahl had planned his last words to be, "I'm not frightened. It's just that I will miss you all so much," to his family. Instead, the nurse injected him with morphine to relieve his pain, and his last words turned out to be, "Ow, duck." I see the man in the corner again. There was no one, but she'd been seeing a dark man in the corner for days and asking about him. Toward the end, this was all she talked about beside crying for her mother. Cancer. Medical professionals. What is the stupidest misconception a patient has had about the human body? I still remember reading a Reddit comment from a doctor years ago that they were telling the person they were about to lose a finger. They said the person seemed way too okay with it. So the doctor asked how they were handling it so well. And the person genuinely told them that it won't be too bad, because at least fingers grow back. It began a whole slew of comments from other doctors with patients who had the same misconceptions about limb amputations. I had a father of a baby absolutely beside himself because his newborn baby had no teeth. Not me, but my sister, currently in residency. She was with a patient who had a severe pain in her thigh. They screened her, ran thousands of tests, and nothing came out of it. They later found out she had a bullet in her arm, but that it had hit her from behind, so it couldn't be seen when she laid down on her back. She thought her thigh was in her arm. I seriously do not get how they didn't find it, since this is more common in ER situations, but I guess mistakes slip through sometimes. I had breast reduction surgery. My husband went to the pre-op APPT with me. The doctor was explaining the surgery and mentioned they would remove my nipples. My husband asked where they were going to get new ones from 12 years later, and we joke about wondering where the nipple locker is. I'm training to be a midwife, and once met an expectant father who panicked when he heard that his daughter was breech, because he thought this meant that she was going to come out of his wife's butt. Actually took a chunk out of the inside of my cheek, trying not to laugh. Working in an ER as a nurse practitioner. I had a patient's granddaughter, who was pregnant, ask me if she dyed her hair. Would it also dye her baby's hair? Made my day! I asked an elderly patient to show me how she gives her insulin. She said, I need an orange. I said, why? She said, well, I draw up my insulin in the syringe, inject it in the orange, and eat it. That's how the doctor showed me to do insulin. I had a colleague in her 30s with children who had come to the UK after marriage. She asked me one day if you could use tampons before you were married. She honestly had no clue about her own anatomy. I used to take retinal photos to look for diabetic retinopathy. When I would call to make appointments, more than once a patient said, well, I just saw the proctologist. No, sir, these are retinal photos, not rectal photos. The couple was pregnant and didn't understand why since they were taking the birth control pill. It turns out it was the guy who was taking it. An X-ray tech working in a mammography clinic had a young woman come up to the desk and ask if she could ride home in the same car with her mom, who just had a mammogram and might still be radioactive. Holistic doctors have convinced a lot of people that adding bleach to their drinking water will cure chronic diseases, literally a high enough dosage to stain clothing being drank through a straw. Best part is there's no convincing them otherwise. At my EMT class, the instructor asked us why women are more likely to have UTIs. One of my female classmates offered up dirty fingers as her answer. Have you had any surgeries? Nope. Does CT scan and sees gallbladder is missing? Did you have your gallbladder removed? Oh yeah, but that was so long ago. It doesn't grow back. Baby came out face down. Father freaked out his child was born without a face. We had a good laugh after. My dad doesn't have a clue on anything that happens in the body. I told him I work in a tissue lab, and he asked, oh, are you developing new Kleenex? When I told him that I work with body tissue, this man really said, oh, I don't think I have that. I just use Kleenex. What do you mean? I can't eat an entire fruitcake. Isn't fruit supposed to be healthy? Diabetic type 2 with a blood sugar level of 450 mg/dL. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.